There is here music, a question nobody asks at baby showers. Nobody brings it up in parenting classes, or during obstetric consultations, music, or in those cheerful pastel books about what to expect when you're expecting. That question is, for the bulk of human history, across most of the world's cultures, what happened when two babies emerged instead of one? Today's answer is celebration. Twins are seen as special. Twins are a blessing. Twins get dressed in matching outfits, photographed for social media, and admired by strangers in grocery stores. The modern world views twins as a charming anomaly, a double dose of joy, a genetic oddity that yields cute posts and heartwarming tales. The modern world has no way to process what I discovered when I began looking into how the rest of human history responded to the arrival of two children, where only one was anticipated. Because for most of written history, in the majority of cultures that left records of their customs, twins were not a blessing. They were an abomination, a curse, evidence of spiritual pollution, sexual wrongdoing, or demonic meddling. And the reaction? Across cultures that had no interaction with one another, divided by oceans and millennia, was strikingly, disturbingly uniform. One of them had to be removed. I need you to absorb that before I go on. Not as an idea, not as a curious anthropological footnote under interesting cultural differences. As a reality, as something that happened to actual live infants, born healthy, breathing, and marked for death because they were the second one out. Because in one culture after another, across every continent, the second twin was regarded as dangerous, unnatural, wrong. And the ways of handling that wrongness included exposure, leaving the infant to die in the wilderness, outright killing, banishment, and elaborate rituals meant to purify the community of the pollution a twin birth was thought to produce. This leads to a simple but essential question. Why? What was it about twins that provoked such a universal, deep-seated, cross-cultural reaction of dread? The standard anthropological answer is superstition. Pre-scientific societies didn't grasp the biology behind multiple births. They interpreted the unusual event through their existing spiritual lenses. In some places, twins were thought to result from adultery, the reasoning being that two children must have two fathers. In other places, twins were seen as proof of contact with spirits, one child human, the other something else. In still other places, twin birth was understood as a break in the natural order, a doubling that violated the expected pattern of one mother, one child, one soul. And these accounts are real. They show up in ethnographic records. Missionaries, colonial officials, and anthropologists documented these beliefs across Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, Australia, and indigenous North America. The beliefs are genuine, the practices are genuine, the explanations offered by the cultures themselves are genuine. But the more I dug, the more I realized that the culture's own explanations don't account for the universality. Superstition is local. It arises within specific contexts, specific environments, specific worldviews. The taboo against twins is not local, it's global. It appears in cultures that had zero contact with one another, cultures that developed entirely separate cosmologies, entirely separate social systems, entirely separate ways of explaining natural events, yet independently reached the same conclusion about twins: that they were dangerous, that one had to be eliminated. The pattern repeats with eerie precision across every inhabited continent. Among the Igbo of southeastern Nigeria, twins were traditionally killed at birth, their bodies thrown into the evil forest, a designated place outside the community for cursed and polluted things. The practice was so entrenched that when early European missionaries arrived and began rescuing twin infants, the local people's horror was aimed not at the killing of children, but at the missionaries' readiness to bring cursed beings into their homes. The missionaries were thought either ignorant or mad. Among certain indigenous groups of the Pacific Northwest, twin births came with elaborate restrictions. The twins and their mother were isolated from the community. Special rituals were needed to contain the spiritual danger. In some groups, one twin was given away or abandoned to lessen the threat. In ancient Rome, twin births were read as omens. The legend of Romulus and Remus, the twin founders of Rome, one of whom kills the other, has been seen by scholars as a mythologized reflection of the twin taboo. The origin story of Western civilization encodes at its very heart the rule that when there are two, one must be destroyed. In pre-colonial cultures across East Africa, Southern Africa, and parts of West Africa, twin killing or abandonment was practiced with variations but remarkable consistency. In Madagascar, in parts of modern-day Ghana, among certain groups in the Congo Basin, the details varied, the principle did not. Twins were wrong. The wrongness had to be fixed. The fix was the removal of at least one child. The silence was overwhelming when I started searching for the scope of these practices, because the anthropological literature documents them extensively, but treats them as separate cultural quirks. Each culture's twin taboo is described and analyzed within its own specific belief system. The Igbo practice is explained through Igbo cosmology. The Roman myth is explained through Roman religion. The Pacific Northwest taboos are explained through indigenous spiritual frameworks. Each explanation is culturally specific, and the question none of them answers is why all of these culturally specific frameworks landed on the same answer, as if following instructions they didn't fully understand. Here's where the investigation took an unexpected turn, because when I started looking at the twin taboo, not as a scattering of isolated customs, but as a global pattern, I realized the taboo wasn't only about killing or abandoning twins. In many cultures, it was about something much more precise. It was about identity, about the danger of duplication, about the existential threat of two beings who are identical. In multiple African traditions, the fear around twins was explicitly tied to the soul. The belief was that one body should hold one soul. Two identical bodies created an identity crisis. Which one had the soul? Which one was real? Which one was the copy, the duplicate? The thing that looked human but wasn't. The twin taboo in these frameworks wasn't about population control or sexual morality. It was about ontology, about what it means to be a unique individual, about the core assumption, shared across cultures worldwide, that every human being is singular, unrepeatable, one of a kind. The more I explored the philosophical depths of the twin taboo, the more I saw that the fear of duplication wasn't limited to twins. It extended to mirrors, to shadows, to reflections in water, to anything that produced a double of a living person. Cultures everywhere developed taboos around reflections. The belief that a mirror could trap your soul, the dread of seeing your double, your Doppelganger, which in European folklore signaled death. The global unease with duplication runs deeper than any single cultural expression of it. It's as if the human mind, at some fundamental level, senses the duplicate as a threat, not a practical one, an existential one. And twins are the ultimate duplication, not a reflection that disappears when you step away from the mirror, not a shadow that fades when the light shifts, but a permanent, living, breathing duplicate that grows up beside you, that shares your face, that exists as a walking challenge to your singularity. The twin taboo might not be about superstition at all. It might be about the deepest human anxiety, the anxiety of not being unique. Now, the erasure. Because what happened to the twin taboo over the last 2 centuries is as revealing as the taboo itself. Missionaries were the first to systematically disrupt twin killing, starting in the mid-1800s. In West Africa, especially in Nigeria, Christian missionaries made rescuing twins a central part of their mission. Mary Slessor, a Scottish missionary working in Calabar in the late 1800s, became famous for saving twin infants from communities that would have killed them. Her work is celebrated in missionary histories as a victory of Christian compassion over pagan cruelty. And it was compassionate. Saving infant lives is unambiguously good. I'm not questioning the morality of the intervention. I'm questioning how complete the story that followed it really is. Because the missionary intervention didn't just stop twin killing. It erased the framework within which twins had been understood for millennia. The missionaries didn't study the twin taboo. They didn't ask why it existed across so many cultures. They didn't investigate the cosmological, philosophical, or experiential dimensions of a practice that had lasted longer than Christianity itself. They declared it evil. They stopped it. And they replaced it with the Christian view of twins as a divine blessing, a gift, a reason to celebrate. The replacement was absolute. Within a generation of missionary contact, communities that had practiced twin taboos for centuries had adopted the Christian framework. The old understanding wasn't debated. It wasn't preserved. It wasn't examined. It was overwritten. And the overriding was so thorough that today, in many of those same communities where twins were once killed, the historical practice is a source of shame so deep that elders refuse to talk about it. The memory remains. The willingness to explore it does not. The official explanation falls apart here because the missionary narrative frames the twin taboo as simple savagery overcome by enlightened compassion. But that narrative requires us to believe that dozens of cultures, independently, across every continent, develop the same savage practice for no meaningful reason, that the most culturally consistent human behavioral pattern outside of language and music was nothing but ignorance, that the taboo carried no information, encoded no knowledge, reflected no insight worth preserving, even as the practice itself was rightly ended. The deeper I went, the more I found traces of something beneath the taboo that the missionaries never investigated and the anthropologists never fully explored. Because in many cultures, the twin taboo came with a body of knowledge about twins that goes beyond simple fear. Knowledge about the relationship between twins, about how twins communicate, about the psychic and emotional bonds between identical individuals that modern science is only beginning to document. Go read the current research on twin telepathy, on the documented cases of identical twins feeling physical sensations when the other twin is hurt, on studies showing that separated identical twins, raised in completely different environments, make strikingly similar life choices, develop similar habits, marry similar people, give their children similar names. The scientific literature treats these findings as curiosities, interesting but unexplained, not important enough to reshape our understanding of human identity and individuality. But what if the ancient cultures that feared twins knew something about these connections that we've dismissed as superstition? What if the taboo wasn't just about fear of the duplicate, but about knowledge of the connection? Knowledge that two beings who share the same body, the same genetic code, the same moment of creation, are linked in ways that challenge the basic assumption of individual autonomy that every human society is built on. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision when you look at how twins were treated in the cultures that didn't kill them. Because not every culture practiced twin elimination. Some cultures did the opposite. They revered twins. The Yoruba of Nigeria, who have the world's highest natural twinning rate, developed an elaborate spiritual tradition around twins. the Igbo tradition, that treated them as sacred beings with special powers. In some South American indigenous cultures, twins were considered shamanic, connected to the spirit world in ways that singletons were not. In these cultures, the twin wasn't a threat. The twin was a bridge, a being who existed in two places at once. A living demonstration that individual identity was more fluid, more connected, more mysterious than ordinary experience suggested. Fear and reverence, killing and worship, opposite responses to the same phenomenon. And both responses, the negative and the positive, share the same underlying recognition. That twins are different, that the existence of a biological duplicate raises questions about identity, individuality, and the nature of the self that no culture has been able to ignore. Here's what I keep coming back to. The erasure. Not the erasure of the killing practice, which deserved to be stopped. The erasure of the knowledge. The erasure of the questions. The millennia, long, cross-cultural investigation of what it means to be duplicated, what it means to share an identity, what it means for two bodies to carry what was supposed to be one soul. That investigation, carried out over thousands of years by dozens of independent cultures, was dismissed as superstition and replaced with a greeting card. Twins are a blessing. Put them in matching outfits. Move on. I'm not saying twins should be feared. I'm not saying any culture was right to kill infants. I'm asking why the most universal human taboo, outside of incest, a taboo documented on every inhabited continent, maintained for millennia by cultures with no contact, a taboo that encoded sophisticated questions about identity and duplication, and the nature of the self, was erased without examination. I'm asking what those cultures knew about twins that made the taboo so persistent and so universal. I'm asking what knowledge was buried when the practice was stopped and the framework was overwritten. I'm asking what twins are, not biologically, but ontologically, that every ancient culture on Earth recognized and that modern culture has decided isn't worth asking about. Handed a congratulations card and told it was the whole story. What else have we been handed and never thought to question?